Bringing a new team into Azure DevOps can sometimes feel like you're walking a tightrope, right? One wrong move and suddenly you've got total chaos, wasted time, security holes, and a bunch of frustrated developers. But if you get it right, man, your team can be productive from the second they log in. So in this explainer, we're going to walk through a 5-step workflow to get you there, smoothly, securely, and in a way that can actually scale. And this quote it absolutely nails the heart of the problem, doesn't it? A sloppy onboarding process isn't just some small annoyance. No, it's a direct hit to your team's momentum. It creates all this friction, leads to silly errors, and just burns through valuable time that your developers should be spending building cool stuff. This slide really just lays it all out, a tale of two onboardings. Over on the left, you've got the chaos. Manually clicking permissions for every single person, spending day one troubleshooting access issues. It's a mess. But on the right, that's the dream. A streamlined workflow where developers are actually shipping code on their first day. Our entire goal today is to build a solid bridge from that chaos on the left to that productivity on the right. So how do we build that bridge? We're going to use this exact 5-step plan. First, we'll lay a rock-solid foundation. Then we'll lock down the workspace, get the tools for code and work all configured, build out that automation engine, and finally, figure out how to actually measure if we're successful. So let's just dive right into step 1. Okay, first things first. Step 1, laying the foundation. I really can't stress this enough. This is the most critical part. Everything, and I mean everything else we do, is going to build on the decisions we make right here. If you get the structure wrong now, believe me, you'll be paying for it for a long, long time. To really get Azure DevOps, you have to understand this simple but super powerful hierarchy. At the very top, you have your organization. That's your whole company's instance. Inside of that, you have projects. A project is where your code, your work items, your pipelines, all that stuff lives. And then inside each project, you have the teams, the actual groups of people doing the work. Nailing this structure from day one is the absolute key to keeping things clear and making sure you can scale later. Okay, once our structure is in place, we can move on to step 2, securing your workspace. The goal here is pretty simple, actually. Give people the absolute minimum access they need to do their jobs, and nothing more. It's called the principle of least privilege, and it's your best friend. And here is a major pro tip for how to do this right. Instead of adding users one by one by one, please don't do that. Connect your Azure DevOps organization to your company's Microsoft Entra ID. Then you can create groups in Entra ID for roles like front-end developers or platform admins, and then you just sync those groups over. Now, when someone joins the company or leaves, your IT team updates one system, and poof, permissions are handled automatically. It is a massive, massive time saver. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. This table is a fantastic starting point. Think of it like a cheat sheet for your permissions. Developers get basic access so they can create branches and queue builds. Team leads get a little more power, maybe managing branch policies. Project admins are the ones who can manage teams and extensions. And then stakeholders, they just get a read-only view. It's a clean, repeatable pattern you can use for every new project. All right, so our foundation is solid and our workspace is secure. Now it's time to get to the fun part. Step 3, setting up code and work. This is where we configure the 2 main places where your teams will live and breathe every single day, their code repositories and their work item boards. Now, one of the first big forks in the road you'll hit is this. Should you use a single mono repo for all your code or set up multiple repositories? Look, a mono repo can be great when different teams need to change shared code a lot because it lets them commit everything together in one shot, what we call an atomic commit. But if your teams deploy totally independently or use different tech stacks, a multi-repo strategy probably makes more sense. It gives them more freedom and keeps things cleaner. There's no single right answer here. You gotta pick what fits your team's workflow. So you've got multiple teams working in the same project. How do you stop their backlogs and boards from becoming one giant chaotic mess? The answer is area paths. By setting up a unique area path for each team, say one for the mobile app team and another for the API team, you give each of them their own filtered backlog and board. This is how you let multiple teams coexist happily in the same project without stepping all over each other. And if area paths are what separate the work, well, iteration paths are what bring everyone back together on a shared timeline. Think about it. By defining a common sprint cadence for everyone, like Sprint 24.08, all your teams plan their work and review it in sync. This is absolutely essential if you want to coordinate releases and understand all those tricky cross-team dependencies. Now for the part where the magic really happens. Step 4, automating the flow. We've set up the structure, the security, the work items. Now it's time to build the engine that's actually going to deliver all that code. And this right here, this is the fundamental rhythm, the heartbeat of modern software delivery. A developer pushes their code. That push automatically triggers a pipeline. The pipeline then builds the code, runs all the automated tests, and packages up the result into something called an artifact. And finally, a release process grabs that artifact and deploys it to your environments, usually with a manual approval gate for production. It's a beautiful thing. Look, Azure DevOps is really powerful right out of the box, but the extensions you can get from the marketplace can seriously supercharge it. A tool like Sonar Cloud gives you automated code quality checks, so you can catch bugs before they hit production. Terraform lets you manage your cloud infrastructure as code, which means your server environments become repeatable and totally reliable. And of course, hooking up notifications to Teams or Slack just keeps everyone in the loop without them having to constantly check another tool. And this is the payoff. This is that seamless, beautiful workflow we've been building up to this whole time. Just picture it. A developer commits their code. Instantly, the work item on their board flips to the next column. A build pipeline kicks off automatically. And if that build fails for any reason, a notification pops up right in their team's chat channel. That is a seamless, fully integrated feedback loop. That's what we want. Okay, we've finally made it to our last step, step 5, measuring your success. Because let's be honest, it's not enough to just set all this stuff up. You have to know if it's actually making a difference. How can we prove that our new process is actually making our teams better? If you're not measuring, you're just guessing. Seriously, you have to track the right data. Elite, high-performing teams, they're aiming to deploy multiple times per day. They can take a change from a developer's keyboard all the way to production in less than a day. And their build success rate? It should be high, way up over 90%. These aren't just vanity metrics. These are direct signals of a healthy, high-performing engineering culture. And that really brings us to our final question. You've done it. You successfully onboarded your first team with this structured workflow. They're productive, they're secure, everything's automated. But now the real test begins. Is your process documented, templated, and ready to handle the next 10 teams? Because that is the